talk about mothers and motherhood and mothers today because it's Mother's Day. I just wanted to point out my favorite part of that gospel reading is, there's a lot of sarcasm in the Bible, more than you would think. There, it gets lost if we use, fancy church language and it sounds all, nice. Actually, it's not as, the Greek and stuff, the language is not as cleaned up as it sounds in English. But there's the point where they're asking him again, the man who was born blind, who you can see, and he's before the Jewish leaders in the synagogue, and they're questioning him, and they question him again, and he says, "Oh, what is it? Do you want to be his disciple?" Right? So they keep asking him to tell the story again, and so he sort of sees he's like a troll, right? He sees a little trigger, and he just pulls it, and he knows that's going to get him off, and he's like, "Oh, so you must want to be his disciples too? I see. You're really interested in him. You want to follow him." And they hate that, right? And they just they blow up and they scream at him and they say, "No, you're his disciple." It sounds very childish. It's like, "You're ugly." "No, you're ugly." It turns into this sort of very childish sort of argument. And I just think it's funny. There's nothing deep spiritual about that. I wanted to share. I just thought it was fun. And there's a lot there in the Gospels that can be funny at times. So, keep your eye out for it. And I wanted to talk about mothers and motherhood, and its importance. And basically this is the importance of raising our young girls to be good mothers and helping women who are mothers to do it well, and how important that is. And how in our society, I think about this it's just this is just an example. This is one of Matushka's stories when she's at Dartmouth, at an Ivy League school, and "Oh, what are you majoring in?" "Oh, I'm going into education." And what do you think people's response is when you say you're going to be a teacher and you're going to an Ivy League school? What do you think the response is? "Oh, that's so good. That's so good of you. My parents would never let me do that." Right? And this is the attitude often you will see is the sort of dismissal and downplaying of the importance of the role of women as mothers, right? This is not entirely bad, right? The reason, obviously, is sort of this push for equality for women and giving women a place in the workplace and wanting them to be able to, have some of those things which are good for them. But in many cases, to the expense of what I think is very much a much more profound and important role for women. Just like for men, being a father is a far more important role than the job or the career you have. It makes a far greater difference. And let's just set aside the spiritual and personal aspects. If you want to change the world for better, you know what? Be a good parent and raise good children. There's nothing more significant that you could do to make the world better than to raise good kids. I mean, think about how many social programs we try to institute in our country to solve a problem that really gets solved in an instant when you just have good families. Schools are like this. What's the biggest kind of key that makes a school so great? It's the families that compose it. And it's really hard. There's no program that could really effectively sort of create that environment, sort of just help create good people know how to parent well, create good mothers. And so it's really difficult to do that. And so we try a lot of other stuff, but we can't get at it. And so there's often, and this is hard for women, right, because they're told they have to have it all. They have to be a mother, and they have to have a career and a job, and they have to do all these things. And sometimes there's these sort of unreasonable expectations that others put on them or that they put on themselves. And it can be a great challenge to sort of find balance. But I think it's important to remember that being a mother is probably the most important thing a woman could do. I mean, not only from the stance of giving life, right? You actually have another human being who's so entwined with your body, it's hard to say actually where they end and you begin. And the mystery of that, and the privilege of being able to be a part of that, is truly remarkable for a woman to have. And sometimes young women, they don't know or think if they want to have children or be mothers at a young age. And I will say this, that everybody should take approaching becoming a parent with great trepidation. It's not something you just sort of slide into or you should do casually or something like that. I mean, if you're not ready or you're a good person, you can really screw other people's lives up in ways that are profound. And so becoming a parent and having children is not something you should do lightly, and it is not something you should lightly dismiss as something you should do. Because you avoid, young people, to avoid having children and being parents and creating a family is something that they do at their own peril and the peril of society. And so there's not any sort of easy answer. It's this crucible that you're pushed between, which is, should I have kids and be a family or should I not? And both options are sort of dangerous, okay? This is often the case that we have in situations in life. And so it's something that should be taken very, very seriously. And so women have this particular challenge of discerning whether or not to be parents oftentimes, and the importance of it is downplayed. And so they will often accidentally sort of get to the point where they're in their 40s or something like, oh, maybe I should have kids now, or maybe I should have a family, and it's often too late to do that. And that's not entirely their fault, I don't think. Sometimes it's society just not helping remind people how important that is, and how often if people miss out on that, they will often regret it. You know, have an uncle, actually it's Elizabeth's uncle, you know, and him and his wife, they didn't have any kids, you know, and they were great aunt and uncle. I mean, they were great to all their nieces and nephews, and really sort of stepped in as sort of like, you know, pseudo-fathers in a lot of ways, and did that because that desire was in them. And, you know, John, her uncle, would have made a fantastic father, you know, and stuff. And later in life, they said that they regretted not going forward with having kids. And I think that we just underplay the importance of that in our society in reminding people how important that is in people's own personal fulfillment, how important that is for society, you know, and how it is one of the, there's really only, I think, one other sort of role besides being a parent or a mother like that, which can sort of really force you to grow up and really transform you. And that is if you're caring for like an aging or dying parent in some way. It's that when you're a caretaker of somebody else, and your whole life, right, when you have a child, your whole life is given over to that person, and you sort of sacrifice and pour yourself out into someone else's existence in a way that there's almost nothing else in life that forces you to do that in that way. And the transformative power of being a mother is remarkable, It's also a very difficult task. And so it's important to think of when we're raising our young daughters and we're raising women in the church, that above all else, that we try to think, how can we raise them to be good mothers, right? Because even if they don't have children, to raise them to have the qualities and character of a mother is probably one of the most important things we can do. When we think about the education of children, what is going to make someone a great mother? How well they can do math? How well they can read and write? No. What is it? It's character and virtue. It's the things of the soul that get cultivated that determine whether or not someone is really, you know, able to be a mother like that. And broadly speaking, when we come to our deathbeds, no one ever asks, right? Did I work enough? Did I get far enough in my career? Right? Did I do any of these things? What is the thing that always matters most? It is always those most intimate, personal, lifelong, sacrificial relationships that we have that matter, right? What do people ask? What do men ask? What do women ask on their deathbed? They say, you know, was I a good mother? Was I a good wife? Right? Was I a good brother or sister? Was I good to my family? That is all that matters when you get to the end of things. And unfortunately, I think that we forget that in this world because that message is just not said very loudly or well or often. And so when we see women who are mothers, we should be trying to figure out how we can support and help women who are mothers. Even if here's the thing, and we can do this whether or not we have biological children or not, right? We can be mothers, grandmothers, godmothers, right? And so you can always take on a mothering role even if you don't have children of your own. People do this all the time, right? Sort of like adopted mothers and things like that, and adopted children, you know, like in a very informal sense. And we can do that to each other. And so in the church or in our neighborhoods or in our lives, as we come across women who are raising young children or other children, we should look at them and think to ourselves, how can I encourage and help that woman do this most sacred job as well as she can? Because what often happens is the burden of raising children and family tends to fall disproportionately on women for a lot of reasons. You know, and there are a lot of single women out there, and you know, that is probably being a single mother is probably the most stressful and difficult job on the face of the earth. You don't live for yourself at all when you're a single mother. And so, when there's a temptation, when we see women out with their kids, and their kids are unruly, or not behaving, or they're not acting like we think they should, or that woman isn't, you know, parenting the way that we think, what do we do? What do we often do with women as mothers that we see in public? We judge them. We judge them harshly. And people will say things, you hear it all the time. And I think what mothers don't need is they don't need more judgment and criticism from afar. They need encouragement. They need us, you know, that woman, the next door neighbor who has a bunch of kids, that woman we see in the grocery store, needs a word of encouragement. You're doing a great job being a mother. You're like, you know, to give a simple word of encouragement, to offer help or a hand to a woman out in public with her children, is what we should be thinking of, how we can practically help somebody. And so the question is, if we don't have children of our own, or our children are grown, how can I help some woman be the best mother that she can be? And where is that opportunity in my life, in my neighborhood, that's around me? And that is, I think, one of the most, you know, valuable things that we can do, and how we can honor mothers and honor our own mother, is recognizing how important that job is, how difficult it is, and how when people take that on, how noble that sort of commitment is to do that for other children. And the sacrifices that mothers make, the sort of suffering and pain that they carry with them for their entire lives. They carry the burdens of their children forever. Forever. And that is a beautiful and a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And so we are all grateful for our mothers, and we think about what they did for us, and so much of who we are, and our character, and our success in life is because of what our mothers did for us. And we should think of how can we help other women, how can we help other children have great mothers too. There's probably no greater blessing or gift we can give them, or we can give society, or give back to God, than to help women become beautiful mothers who raise beautiful children. Glory to Jesus Christ.